Hello and welcome to The Print. Today we have a very special guest with us, Afghan Ambassador to India, Farid Mamundzay. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Right. So the first thing I want to speak to you about is arguably topical, since we've just had the budget, the Indian budget. We can see in the budget that the development aid to Afghanistan has remained largely the same, rupees 200 crore. Yeah. Yes, this has remained the same as last year, but it's still significantly less than 350 crore rupees that was allocated to Afghanistan in 2021 to 2022. So how do you view this? Do you think India could be doing more?
Well, it's an important topic that you raised, and we were hoping that we would have slightly more budget allocation for the year 2023-2024, given the dire humanitarian situation in Afghanistan and the status of unemployment in the country, the increasing cost of living there, and the lack of support from the wider international community to end the ongoing crisis. But nevertheless, India's unwavering and generous support has always been there, and this budget again signifies that the government of India is there to, and the people of India, together with the government of India, are there to support Afghans unconditionally at a difficult time. And at the same time, I would hope that this budget is spent. We have had budgets in the past. I don't have the exact figures from last year, but if we look at the amount of resources spent on Afghanistan over this period, I think that would not add up to 200 crores.
Yes, it's the revised estimates say it's about 150 crores.
So, I hope that this amount would be actually spent on the necessities that the Afghan people face today, the requirements that they have in various fields. But I thank the government of India for the support that they have been extending at a difficult time. And again, it's utilization in a way that would generate the expected results for the Afghan people.
On that note, it seems the Indian government has also been a little reluctant to resume development projects in Afghanistan. What are your views on that?
Development projects have its own challenges, given that the de facto Taliban authorities have control of a lot of those projects. And working or extending assistance to those projects would require the engagement, or in some cases, the formal engagement of Taliban. Which is problematic, not only for the government of India, but for the larger international community. For getting assistance of that scale, Taliban would have to accept some realities and begin to behave in a different manner, which is to respect and honor the will of the Afghan people, and which is to form an inclusive government and legitimacy at home before they can earn and win a recognition outside Afghanistan. So the development projects are problematic. It's not only India that had started in unfinished projects remain there, but there are many other countries, including the United States, many European countries, who are in the midst of many such projects which require funding to be completed. But again, there is one major obstacle. There are, of course, other logistics and financial issues as well. The banking system does not operate as it used to in the past. So there are limitations, but the biggest hurdles at present is a government that has no formal recognition from any country in the world. many governments, in particular democratic governments, find it difficult to resume work on those unfinished projects and complete them.
On the issue of, women's education in Afghanistan, it's a very hot topic issue. The UN seems to be in talks with the Taliban government to sort of reverse the ban on women's education, girls' education. How confident are you in these talks?
Well, first we need to engage the international community, the UN, the regional countries. They all have a role to play in it. They need to, and the role is that they need to convince Taliban to give women their human, their social, their Islamic and their political rights. We have seen a great deal of those rights being taken away from them, whether it is banning girls from going to school or banning women to work for NGOs. Those are their basic human rights. Taliban had pledged in the past that they would not go on the way they did in the 90s. There were a lot of optimism that the conflict had come to an end forever in Afghanistan. Ever since Taliban's return, it has been almost 19 months. And if you look at the events of these 19 months, we have been on a downward trajectory. The engagement of the international community is welcomed by the Afghans. There has been some temporary relaxation given by Taliban from time to time on many of these issues, taking their ban back on letting women work for NGOs, for instance. So the engagement is producing some results, but getting Taliban agree to take important steps is something which would require more convincing, which would require more collective effort from the wider international community. I think that has not happened yet. The region also has a responsibility to fulfill, and sadly that is not happening as well. We have important and powerful countries in the region, including India, China, Russia, Iran and Pakistan in this instance. We need to have the region together, unified on Afghanistan, and that may produce results.
Speaking of, these regional players, India has taken over the rotating presidency of the SCO. And the SCO Afghanistan Contact Group is a key body in that. We recently saw the Indian NSA Ajit Doval. He's planning, or reports say he's planning a trip to Moscow this month to conduct a regional dialogue on Afghanistan. So what are your expectations, one, of this contact group, and two, of the regional dialogue on Afghanistan under India's SCO presidency?
Well, this group was created, the SCO, Afghanistan Contact Group, was created in 2018. It is a 5 years old contact group. And the SCO brings all regional countries. That's exactly my point, that we need an intensive engagement. Not only the meeting taking place to issue declaration or formal statements, but to get regional players agree to imply some practical pressure on Kabul, and that is possible. If we have Russia, China, and India on the same page, there is a lot of regional pressure that Taliban would face. That is not the case today. The visit of the NSA to Moscow is in the right direction, and I hope that more work would be done in that regard to have major regional countries working together on Afghanistan. There is a lot of convergence of interest there. There's no divergence of interest on Afghanistan when it comes to instability and insecurity in Afghanistan. The entire region would have issues and problems arising from an insecure Afghanistan in the form of instability, in the form of terrorism. We are seeing terrorist attacks happening in Peshawar. If the situation continues the way it is today, we may be seeing more such attacks in this region. It's I don't want to paint a doomsday scenario, but there are terror groups in Afghanistan today protected and supported by the Taliban who have regional and international ambitions. And the longer this gets delayed, that there's no regional and international consensus on Afghanistan, there's going to be more problems for the countries around the world, not only in the region. Of course, the region would be a target, but there would be more problems in the months and years ahead. So the sooner we get to consensus on Afghanistan, the better it is for the safety and security of not only Afghans, but the entire region.
Talking about the safety and security of Afghans, I wanted to discuss the e-visa, quote-unquote, issue. So in August 2021, when Kabul fell, India was one of the first countries to issue emergency visas or e-visas to Afghans. But according to our estimates, only about approximately 300 e-visas have been issued to Afghans, most of whom seem to be Hindus or Sikhs. So how do you view this?
Well, visa issuance has been an issue of continuous concern to many Afghans over the past 19 months. The approach adopted by the authorities in India has been such that we did not expect Afghans to be treated in such a way. There were genuine cases where Afghans were trying to flee for safety, trying to flee Afghanistan in order to seek safe passage to a third country. India could have played the role of that transit country, the way Pakistan and Iran did. We had closer to 140,000 Afghans evacuated by the United States, irrespective of their background or beliefs. We expected a great and historic friend like India, at least to provide that and extend that support to a few thousand Afghans. We have seen the revocation, the visa revoking of 2,500 plus Afghans who were in the midst of their studies in second, third or fourth year. Some were even in the final stages of their PhD. So it was very unfortunate to see that happening. I hope that this could have been managed in a better way, and I still hope that the visa policy to Afghans would be reviewed, would be favorably reviewed in order to help those Afghans who require help. We look at India as a close, dear and historic friend, and we have always considered the Indian model of governance, the Indian model of democracy as a model for ourselves. Yes, there has been some disappointments among Afghans on the visa issues, and there's been some right concerns on part of the security apparatus here in India, which need to be thoroughly considered as well, which those agencies, those organizations have their own responsibilities to the Indian citizens and the security of India as a whole. But I would also want to reiterate the fact that there hasn't been a single incident over the past 75 years of India's independence where an Afghan has been involved in any security related issue or security incidents in our long historic ties. So some relaxation need to happen, and I hope it would happen sooner rather than later.
I'm sure the issue with e-visas, as you said, one is New Delhi's security concerns, and then it's also the logistics of it, because we don't have a diplomatic presence there. Sure, we have 2 or 3 officials there in Kabul, but we don't have a diplomatic presence there. On that note, I also wanted to ask you about something that we had reported on, I think on 12th January. We had gotten some source-based information that the Taliban had requested MEA to station one of their representatives in New Delhi, in this embassy. Abdul Balki, the spokesperson for the Taliban government, was one of the proposed candidates, it seems. So what are your views on that?
Well, first on the presence of diplomatic team in Kabul, or a team that could wit the background of an applicant in order to issue them a visa. As I speak, there are 3 weekly flights, almost 3 weekly flights from Kabul, evacuating Afghans to go to the United States. They have no presence in Kabul. There are many other countries with no presence in Kabul, yet their visas being processed. Like I said, that the visa policy, I hope, would be favorably reviewed, and they would begin to issue visas sooner than later. There are genuine cases. There are people who have been coming here for medical treatment for the past 20 years. People with long association with India. They had studied here. At one time, they had lived here. So, and in some instances, we as a mission take their responsibility. Those in terms of security or overstay, those people, the government will be provided with the required assurances. But in any case, I hope that would change. Secondly, on the issue of Taliban diplomatic representation in Delhi, this is something for the Indian government to comment on whether they would want to proceed with Taliban's request of accrediting their diplomats in Delhi. I have no information in this regard. We as the representative of the former republic would continue for as long as it takes, as we are deemed necessary to continue in India. We have been treated well by the Indian people, by the Indian government so far, and we have continued the mission with the required service and dedication to serve our community, students, traders, and the diaspora here. Of course, anyone serving in any diplomatic mission would want an honorable and dignified exit, but at the same time a responsible one. It would be difficult to have one mission with two competing agendas. If we have Taliban representative in Delhi, where we as the representative of the Republic
from the Ashraf Ghani government,
from the former government, would find it extremely difficult to operate and work together with Taliban diplomats, Taliban representative under the flag of the Emirates. We would have no problem if our people began to accept that in Afghanistan. That has not happened. We consider the interest of our people as supreme. And in this instance, the will and consideration of our people have not been taken into account in the past 19 months. Should that happen, should Taliban hold and convene al-Wajirga, the Grand Assembly, when the traditional Afghan legitimacy required to govern Afghans, we would have no problem to work with them. But as of now, a self-appointed group with no legitimacy at home and no recognition anywhere in the world, any Afghan diplomat will find it extremely difficult to serve together the interest of Afghan people in one mission with them. We Afghans, sooner or later we would have to work together. We understand that, we realize that. But not in the current set of circumstances where the greatest or the greater interest of our people have not been considered.
So just to wrap up, I wanted to ask you something a little interesting. As our viewers now know, you were first posted to New Delhi while you were part of the former Afghan government, the Ashraf Ghani government. The former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who was under the Trump administration, he's just come out with a book in which he describes Ashraf Ghani as, quote unquote, a total fraud. What are your views on this?
I think it's more of a political statement, trying to put the entire blame on the former government and the former president in particular. The peace deal between the United States and Taliban was negotiated under his watch. It was Pompeo and Ambassador Khalilzad who negotiated the peace deal with Ghani Baradar and several other Taliban leaders in Doha, and the government of Qatar as a moderator. The deal has miserably failed, and it continued to dishonor all those commitments in order to show this to the American public for whatever future political ambition or politics he may have said it. The real blame here is not to be put on the former republic or the president. Yes, we may have been part of the problem, which many of us acknowledge, that there has been issues of poor leadership on our part. But the greater share of the responsibility lie on the US government, the US, the Trump's administration at that time. So it was Pompeo who watched this deal being signed between Khalilzad and Baradar. It was he who endorsed it. In less than a year after that deal, al-Zawahiri was killed in Kabul. Al-Zawahiri, the chief of Al-Qaeda. Less than few months after that deal was signed, after Taliban took over Kabul, none of those four major commitments had been honored. The intra-Afghan dialogue never happened. Ceasefire never happened, which the Taliban was supposed to deliver. The two other commitments, that the withdrawal of the US forces would happen and the prisoner release would happen. The Afghan government, we were made part of the deal, yet we were not present there. The US was deciding on our behalf. We have been greatly undermined by Pompeo's deal. This was not an Afghan deal, an Afghan peace deal. It was rather a surrender to Taliban in a way where Taliban would let the American forces withdraw from Afghanistan, giving them a safe passage. We have been undermined, the Afghan public has been undermined, we feel betrayed by this deal. And I think those remarks that comes from senior officials, former officials like Secretary Pompeo, are very irresponsible. It hurts the sentiments of many Afghans to see the blame shifting from the Trump administration to purely Afghan government or former president. Yes, we share part of the responsibility, but the total failure comes from the deal itself, and that was negotiated by the US government.
Well, thank you so much for taking out the time to speak with us, and we hope to speak to you again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.